Hi everybody. Today we're going to read another book about the fields of home.
And we've started it, and we're on chapter 14 now. It's been a long hiatus since we read it. I don't know how it happened, but we're back, and we hope you're all back too. So, hello everybody.
And even if you're not in Maine, we're still glad you're watching this.
That's exactly right.
Even if you're on the other side of the world or something,
Now,
or in China or in Florida or whatever.
It's funny Jackson should say that because this is primarily two people asked me to read it, Bert and Cora, in the country of China. Not China, Maine, but the country. Halfway around the world, right, Jax?
And Bert lives in Chongqing, China.
That's right.
And I don't know the other person who lives there. I don't even know who's...
Her name is Cora. That's all we really know. And they're friends. So chapter 14, Trouble with Bees. Remember, Ralph Moody's on his grandfather's farm in Maine, and for the summer.
It's been a long time since we've seen you. And also, for those of you who haven't heard this, I lost a tooth. If you've already heard it, that's fine. Just forget about all that part in this video, but just enjoy the book.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Jackson. Jackson lives in Bangor, and we're in Brooks, Maine, but he comes down to visit often, so he's here right now.
So, enjoy the book. I'm going to go get a drink. Enjoy.
Okay, Jackson. It was as black as pitch, and I could hear the rain pattering on the roof when Grandfather called me at 4 o'clock the next morning. The chores were done, breakfast eaten, and the cows taken to the pasture by 5 o'clock in the morning. Grandfather's train wasn't leaving Lisbon Falls until 8:30, but he was all in a dither. Anyone would have thought he was going away for a year instead of a week. He had to look at the old sow with a litter of pigs, at the hogs in the barn cellar, at the spider web and the calf in the sheep barn, and he said goodbye to the yellow colt every time he went past his stall. Then I had to go to the high field with him while he showed me just how he wanted the dressing spread. Dressing is another name for cow manure. Don't spread it stingy, and don't waste none of it, Ralphie, he told me as we tramped over the field in the rain. Didn't winter but 6-7 head of stock, and dressing is tonnel scarce this year. Spread it even, no big lumps and bare spots, and dress the hilltop heavy in the edges. Water will leach it down once the snow melts come spring. I calculate on 8 loads being a day's work, if you spread it nice and even. Just a moment, folks. Want me to help, Jax? We have to get this bottle open, and that, boy, that's really tight. There you go, Jackson. Let's say thank you.
Thank you.
The dump carts under the barn might need a tighter mending before you commence, but there ain't no call to waste time on it. All the way to the falls, Grandfather told me stories about Gettysburg. See, his grandfather was in the Army during the Civil War. At the depot, 4 other Grand Army men were waiting for him. He only let me stop long enough for him to get out his valise, tell me he'd be home in a week's time, and pet old Nell on the rump. If you remember, old Nell is one of the horses. Then as I drove away, he called after me, calculating on you hauling 40-50 loads of dressing while I'm gone, Ralphie. You won't have time to dawdle, and it'll keep you out of mischief. Tell Millie I'll fetch her a present once I come home, and you meet me here a week from this morning. I'd seen the dump cart backed into the corner of the barn cellar. Wasn't really a cart at all, but a wagon. There were 2 great big wheels in back, with a body balanced across the axle, and 2 little wheels in front. I was afraid it would go to pieces like the one-horse shay before I got it hauled up to the carriage house. That one-horse shay refers to a poem by that name, about a shay that's put together carefully, but it falls apart when it's used. It's a good poem. I haven't read it for years. Let's see now. Most of the planks in the bottom were rotted or broken. Nuts and bolts were missing. All the wheels creaked. One of them was held together with rusty wire. Doesn't sound very good, does it?
No.
The rain had settled into a steady drizzle when I backed the dump cart into the middle of the carriage house floor, put the horses away, and went back to start working on it. I was sure it'd keep right on raining for a couple of days, so I wouldn't have to hurry. You okay, Jax? and made up my mind that I'd do just as good a job on that dump cat as Uncle Levi would have done if he'd been there. Of course, I had to take the rotten wood, rusty bolts, and old wires off before new parts could be put in. It took longer than I thought it would. When I was nearly finished, the whole thing sort of collapsed. It acted the way an old cow does when she's been driven until she can't take another step. At first, it just groaned and settled a little in front. Then the back end swayed and thumped down on one haunch. It did look kind of wrecked when Millie came running out to see what had happened, what had made all the noise. For a minute, she just stood there in the doorway, with her mouth open and her eyes looking like white saucers with bright blue centers. "Good Lord of living, what in tunket did you do to it?" she asked. "Thomas will skin you alive and hang your hide on the barn door." "Oh, no, he won't," I told her. "By the time I get finished, it'll be as good as a new dump cat." "Huh, by the time Christmas comes, it'll be a snowing. You can haul dressing on a sled. How long you calculate it's going to take to piece the cussed thing back together again?" "I'll bet you I have it all done by the time it stops raining," I told her. "That wheel isn't broken, it's just fallen apart, and Uncle Levi left me the keys to his tool drawers." "Drawers," she sniffed. "Trouble with you is you're getting too big for your drawers. Levi himself couldn't put the devilish thing together in 2 days, and I'll drink all the rain that falls twixt now and sundown tomorrow." Millie's quite a character, isn't she? I'd been so busy, I hadn't paid any attention to the weather. When I looked out through the doorway, the whole eastern sky was bright blue, hens were picking up worms in the dooryard, the sun made drops of water on the apple trees look like diamonds. Before I said anything more, I had to think a little. "Well, tomorrow's the 4th of July, I told her. "That's a legal holiday, and you're not supposed to have to work. By tomorrow night, I can have it looking almost new." If it hadn't been for Millie's helping me, I'd have turned out to be a liar at that. And though we made it strong enough, we never did get it looking nearly like new, but it took us till Millie... Boy, I gotta start over again. But it took us till nearly midnight on the 4th. Millie called me at 4 o'clock the next morning. By sunrise, I was pitching my first load of dressing, while she did the chores. I didn't like the job. The dressing was smelly, as heavy as lead. It took 200 foot. What? Excuse me, everybody. What, dear? Oh. Huh. The spreading took twice as long as the loading. No matter how hard I snapped my wrist, the dressing would fall in big blobs and leave bare spaces bigger than a washtub. After each unloading, I'd have to climb down, break up the lumps, and scatter them with a fork. It was nearly 9 o'clock before I had the second load spread, and I'd run all out of breakfast. After I had the dump cat backed in under the barn, I started for the kitchen to get a piece of johnny cake or something. I was halfway to the house when I heard what sounded like an engine letting off steam in the east orchard. At first, I didn't see anything that could be making a noise, but when I'd poked around a while, I found it was bees. About a bushel of them were clustered on the top branch of the tallest apple tree, and the whole mass was seething. I watched them for a few minutes, then went up to the house and told Millie about it. She couldn't have jumped quicker if one of the bees had stung her. She was peeling apples for a pie. Bounced out of the chair so fast she spilled the peelings all over the kitchen floor. I didn't know that bees split up into families, or that they swarmed and would fly off to the woods if you didn't put them into a new hive right away. But Millie knew all about it. She went tearing down to the orchard as fast as she could run, took a quick look at the bees and shouted, "Fetch a high ladder as fast as the Lord will let you. Them's Thomas's black belts, and he'll skin us alive if we let him get away. I'll fetch the bee hats." I ran for the tall ladder, let it down, and carried it as far as the yard wall when Millie called to me to come to the bee shop. She already had on a straw hat with a mosquito netting veil that came down over her shoulders. She crammed another one on my head, pulled the veil down, and gave me a pair of gloves with netting sleeves at least 2 foot long. Get 'em on, she snapped at me as she threaded her own arm into a sleeve. Never seen such a helpless, awkward boy. Make a fist. Don't go ramming your thumb through the netting. Good lands, hurry up. Bees don't wait on nobody. Before I had one hand in a glove, she'd put both of hers on. I'd grabbed up an old dishpan, was running toward the ladder. I didn't bother with my second glove, but stuffed it in my pocket and ran after her. We had a lot of trouble getting the ladder up into the tree. The branches were thick, but where the bees were, there wasn't a branch to rest it against. But I will, just a second. Both our hats got twisted around on our heads. Sweat was running down into my eyes. Millie was yapping like a fox terrier. Before the ladder was set solidly, she grabbed the dishpan in one hand and started climbing. With the ladder sort of balanced in midair, I couldn't keep it from wobbling a roll. Millie was up about 6 rungs when she hollered down to me, "Watch what you're doing and hold that devilish ladder still." Now there's Millie. They can't see the picture, Jackson, until you got the place? There's Millie up on the ladder. You see the bees up in the air above her washtub? Hold it still, Jack, so everybody can look at it. You gotta turn it a little bit,
Those
Jackson.
black dots.
Yeah, right, those are bees. It doesn't show Ralph down below, but he's down on the ground.
There's some more down there.
Yeah, that's right.
Since it's black and white, it looks like water, but it's actually ground.
Yeah, I think so.
And she's collecting apples, I think.
Bees. She's trying to get the bees into that was. Oh, look, a dress caught on the stub of a branch. See? Oh, boy. That might be trouble. Okay.
Let's read to find out what it is.
Yes. Let's see. I braced my feet and held my shoulder against one of the uprights, but it didn't do much good. After every couple of rungs, Millie would stop and yell at me to quit mooning around like a sick calf and to hold the ladder still. Then a bee started crawling up my arm. At every step, I expected it to sting me. When I put my head over to try brushing it off with my hat, the ladder began dancing. I just had to shut my eyes tight and let the bee crawl. It had nearly reached my elbow when Millie screamed. When I first looked up, all I could see was Millie's pink bloomers. She'd shaken the bees off into the dishpan, started down, holding the pan in both arms. But her skirt had caught on a twig, and she backed out of it. She yanked the skirt a few times with her elbow, but the twig only poked through the cloth, and the bees seemed to have gone crazy. They were everywhere. The tune of their hum had changed till it sounded like 40 runaway buzzsaws, and Millie's howls made it sound as if all the saws were hitting nails. I didn't have time to find a solid limb for the ladder, but shoved it toward the center of the tree, scrambled up to get Millie unhooked. Just as I reached for the twig that was holding her skirt, the ladder lurched. One of my feet went through between 2 rungs. I grabbed for anything to save myself. Next thing I knew, I was hanging there with Millie's skirt hauled down over me like a tent. There were 40 or 50 mad bees in there with me, and Millie was shrieking like a fire whistle. I heard the dishpan fall just as she started pounding my head with both fists and calling me a senseless idiot. Tree branches were breaking and I could feel we were falling, but I couldn't see a thing and cut the skirt tighter. If it hadn't been for Millie, I wouldn't have known what to do when we hit the ground. My veil was ripped loose from my hat. Millie's skirt was split up to the waist. My legs were all tangled in the ladder. She stopped just long enough to see I could get free, then jumped up and ran for the watering trough at the back corner of the barn. I went right behind her, and at least half of the bees went with us. It felt as if a million wild bushmen was shooting me with poisoned arrows. It was lucky that the old watering trough was a great big hogshead, that's a giant-sized barrel, and that all but a foot of it was set down into the ground. Millie jumped into it like a bullfrog, only she went feet first, and I jumped in right beside her. My mouth was open. I was still catching my breath from running when Millie ducked my head under the cold water. When she let me up, I was choking and nearly drowned, and 2 or 3 dozen bees were floating around on top of the hogshead. I never knew before that cold water could feel so good. I would have stayed there all morning if Millie had let me. As soon as the bees had stopped buzzing around our heads, she made me climb out. She said we'd have to put mud on our welts right away to draw the poison, or we would both be awfully sick, and we might even die. Millie was stung just as much as I, but mine were mostly on my face, neck, and arms. We dug into the bank below the spring, got out some smooth, wet blue clay. I plastered it on my neck and face till there were just holes for my eyes, nose, and mouth. From the tops of her shoes to her bloomers, Millie looked like an artist's clay model. At first, the wet clay felt about as good as cold water, but when it began to dry out, I thought my head and arms were breaking into flames. All the time we were putting on the clay, Millie kept worrying and fretting about what Grandfather would say because we'd lost the swarm of bees. But as it dried, she forgot about Grandfather and only talked about bees. The things she said about them got hotter right along with the stings. I'd been stung so many times that between the fingers of my right hand they stuck out like red bananas on a stalk. Of course I couldn't pitch dressing with them, and Millie had to help me unharness the horses. Mrs. Littlehill, bless you, Mrs. Littlehill is a neighbor down the road, okay, Jax? Had heard Millie scream and had seen what was happening. She brought us some white pills we had to take every hour, but they didn't seem to help the burning or the swelling. By noon, my face had swollen till I could only see a crack of light through one eye, and my lips felt as if they were big enough for a hippopotamus. I knew Millie must be feeling just as bad as I, but she did all the evening chores alone, made me sit in the house with a cold, wet towel over my face. I couldn't eat anything. But before bedtime, she brought me a couple of eggs, beaten up with warm milk and vanilla. And she never said a word about my letting the ladder wobble so that she caught her dress in the apple tree. In spite of the bee stings, I'd been sort of drowsy during the afternoon, but couldn't sleep when I went to bed. The night was hot, I was sweaty, and every way I turned made the stings burn more. Then I started worrying. Having lost the bees didn't bother me nearly as much as it did Millie, but I did feel worried about the dressing. With Grandfather expecting me to haul 8 loads a day, there would be 40 loads in a week, not counting Sunday or the 4th of July. 3 days already passed and I only hauled 2 loads. Unless my hand got a lot better than the night, I'd lose the next day too. Then there'd be Sunday. When Grandfather came home, he'd have every reason to say I was shiftless and lazy, and that he couldn't get away and trust me to do a job man fashion. Really, it wasn't Grandfather I cared so much about. It was Uncle Levi. He might think I'd done a good job on the haying just because Grandfather was there to drive me along. I was no good unless I was driven. Thinking about Uncle Levi and haying made me remember the horse fork, and I wished there was some sort of horse fork for hauling manure. Then I had an idea. Riding up on a trolley car from Bath, I'd seen a man spreading manure with a machine. I hadn't paid much attention to it, but lying there in the dark, I could almost see it working again. At the back of the wagon, there had been a big cylinder that spun and threw out an even spray of dressing. I knew that between the wagon wheels and the cylinder, there had to be some sort of a hookup to make it spin. I knew there had to be some way of pushing the load back against the cylinder. I lay there for a long time, trying to figure it out. Then I got another idea. There was a Sears Roebuck catalog hanging on a string in the corner of the privy. That's an outhouse, an old-fashioned bathroom. And there were pictures of manure spreaders in it. I felt for the commode, found a sulfur match, and struck it. The swelling in my eyes had gone down enough I could see the flame clearly with either one of them. I got up, pulled on my overalls, took the card of matches, and tiptoed downstairs. I need to back this up a little bit. Let's see. I took the lantern from the summer kitchen, but didn't light it until I was around the corner of the woodshed. Old Bess came out, licked the ends of my fingers, and begged softly and thought to be petted. I just stopped long enough to pet her head a couple of times, and went on to the privy. There were 6 pictures of manure spreaders in the catalog, all different. From them I could see just what made the machines work. The cylinder part wouldn't be too hard to rig up, but I couldn't figure out any way to make a moving wagon bottom to push the load back. All I could do was rig a cylinder at the back end of the dump cart, then, by taking it up a little, let the load slide back by itself. Since I was left-handed, my swollen right one wouldn't bother me too much in doing work with hand tools, and with a manure spreader I might get 36 loads hauled before Grandfather came home. I took the lantern, prowling around to see what I could find for a cylinder, an axle shaft for it, and drive chains to make it spin. The only thing I could find that was round enough and the right size for a cylinder was an old oak log. It was 10 or 12 feet long, lying propped up on a couple of pieces of cordwood. It was pretty heavy. I'd only need about 4 feet of it. Thought the weight would help in keeping the cat body tipped back. After I'd gone to the barn cellar and measured the dump cat, I got the big crosscut saw from the carriage house and cut a piece just the right length off the end of the log. The sawing took quite a while. It made my right hand hurt, but I didn't have to use my fingers and got along all right. The sky was getting gray in the east when I figured out a way to make a shaft and bearings. There was an old buggy with the other wrecked equipment behind the sheep barn. The wheels were all broken, but the hubs were whole. It had a steel rear axle. A hacksawing a foot off each end of it, I could mount the hubs and the sideboards of the dump cat, use them for bearings. Then I'd only have to bore the right size hole in the center of each end of the log, drive in the piece of steel, buggy axle, and I'd have as good a shaft as anyone could ask for. I had one end sawed off the buggy axle when Millie came out and caught me. She raised more hullabaloo and called me more kinds of fool boy than grandfather ever had. Before she'd quiet down and say she'd help me, I had to remind her that she thought the horse fork was a fool idea too. Even had to make her believe that the bees getting away was mostly her fault. That I had the dressing all hauled by the end of the week if I hadn't been stung, and that I couldn't get the job done now without a machine. Almost the end of the chapter, aren't we, Jax? Yeah, this is the last page. We worked hard enough during the day that we didn't have much time to think about bee stings. By late afternoon, we had a manure spreader. It wasn't a fancy one, but it would work. We'd driven more than 100 spikes into the cylinder for the teeth. Had rigged a sprocket on a wheel hub to turn the spinning chain and fastened block and tackle on the front. What, Jax?
I thought Grandma's calling.
Oh, okay.
I think Granny's calling you.
No, not now, I guess.
No, I heard her say Stephen.
Oh. Let's see.
Do you want to answer her?
And had fastened blocks and tackle on the front end of the cat body so we could adjust the amount of the tip-up we needed. The only real trouble... No, Jax, she isn't calling me. The only real trouble came when I tried to spread the first load. As soon as all the weight slid back behind the wagon axle, it lifted the front wheels higher than the horses' backs. We had to chain what was left of the oak log over the front axle to hold the wheels down. Aside from the yellow colts raising Cain until he got used to the spinning cylinder, we didn't have any more trouble with the spreader. But Millie had to drive while I tended the tackle and kept the load sliding right. Millie was so worried about all the time I'd lost that she would have helped me pitch dressing if I'd let her. She did all the chores, both morning and evening, and held the lantern for me after dark. With the spreader doing all the real work of unloading, I got a 20-minute rest after each load I had to pitch on. That way I could work about as fast as I could swing a fork. And both of the first 2 nights we kept right at it till 10 o'clock. On our third day, the last one we had to go, we hauled our 47th load out of the barn cellar, just at sunset. When we had it spread, bless you, the high stony field was covered from wall to wall with a smooth, even blanket of dressing. And that is the end of that chapter. Chapter 15 is next. Chapter 15, just for...
Grandfather Sends Me Home.
It's titled Grandfather Sends Me Home. Right.
Chapter,
Okay.
Wait,
Yeah.
are we going to read another book?
No, that's all for tonight for the reading. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
I'll see you again soon, okay? It won't be long this time. I want to push the button, Jax?
Yeah, maybe tomorrow we will see you. Bye. Tell your parents to... Actually, I forgot what I was going to say. But keep watching this video. If you are watching it on your phone, please subscribe and keep watching. Bye.